My name is Claire Monroe. I thought helping my only brother plan his wedding would bring us closer. Instead, I was humiliated by his fiancée in front of our entire family, and my own mother said nothing. I didn't know it then, but that moment would ignite a quiet war I never asked for, but I refused to lose. Before we dive into this story of betrayal, strength, and poetic justice, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories reach. Now let's begin at the moment everything changed. It was the kind of perfect Northern California day that made you believe in fairy tales. The sun painted long golden streaks across the rows of grapevines. The breeze was warm but playful, and the scent of lavender floated through the air like a blessing. I was standing near the edge of a vineyard estate in Napa Valley, watching my brother Matthew laugh with his fiancée, Harper. They looked like a magazine ad, her in soft ivory linen, him in his navy blazer, both so effortlessly stunning it made my throat tighten. "Can you believe it's really happening?" I asked, my voice light. "Our baby brother's getting married." Harper turned. Her expression stayed frozen for a second too long before softening into something that looked like a smile but didn't quite make it to her eyes. "It's exciting, yeah." I took a breath and stepped forward. "I know you two want things perfect, and I'd love to help. I've already started pulling together some vendors, florals, reception hall options, just in case you need a hand." She blinked. "Oh, that's sweet of you, Claire, but we've got it covered." "I know, but planning can be a lot. I don't mind pitching in," I offered again, feeling hopeful, maybe too hopeful. "This is Matthew's big day. I want it to be amazing." And then it happened. Harper's smile dropped as quickly as a guillotine. "Claire," she said, her voice louder now, firm and cool like glass, "this is a private matter between Matthew and me. We'll do everything ourselves." A few nearby guests turned toward us. Her words sliced through the afternoon like a scream in a chapel. I forced a smile, throat burning. "Of course, I just thought. We've got it handled," she said again, her voice curving into something that sounded polite, but her eyes said, "Stay in your lane." I stood there, hands awkwardly knotted, as Harper pivoted back to Matthew and looped her arm through his, dragging him toward the vineyard entrance. He didn't look back. Not once. I could still hear laughter echoing down the rows of grapes as I turned away. The taste of humiliation is strange. It's not just bitter, it's warm, like shame and sunburn. My cheeks were on fire. I glanced around and saw Aunt Melanie glance down at her wineglass, pretending she hadn't heard. Our cousin Jude offered me a sympathetic half-smile, then looked away. And my mother, June Monroe. She stood silently under the white canopy tent, sipping her Sauvignon Blanc like nothing had happened. I had offered help, support, love, and been dismissed like a gnat at a picnic. I don't know what hurt more, Harper's cruelty or the silence that followed it. But something shifted in me that day. Something sharp and still and undeniable. She didn't want my help, fine. But she had no idea what she had just started. The next morning, I found myself sitting in a cozy corner of Café Bellina, a quiet spot nestled between a flower shop and an antique bookstore in downtown Napa. My laptop was open, wedding spreadsheets glowing on the screen, and the barista had just brought over my second lavender latte. I know what you're thinking. After what Harper said, after the public rejection, why didn't I just walk away? Honestly, I asked myself the same thing. But the truth is, I wasn't doing this for Harper. I was doing it for Matthew. For the little boy who once convinced me he could fly if I just held his hand tight enough on the trampoline. For the young man who sat by my hospital bed after my car accident senior year, missing finals just to bring me orange jello and make me laugh. This wasn't about ego. This was about love. So I got to work. I'd already made calls that morning, talked to florists about seasonal arrangements, and contacted the historic Bramblewood Inn to pencil in a tentative reservation for the reception. The venue's event manager, Elise, had been incredibly warm on the phone. "We're flexible with dates," she'd told me, "and your name's on the account so you'll have full control." Those last few words made me pause. Full control. I hadn't asked for that. But apparently I was the only one paying deposits so far. I'd even offered to secure the caterer, charging the retainer to my own card, thinking Matthew would settle up later. But so far, no one had asked how things were going. Not Harper. Not even my brother. Maybe I was invisible. Or maybe I'd made myself invisible for so long that now they didn't even think to include me. Still, planning became a strange form of therapy. Here at the cafe, surrounded by the smell of pastries and the hum of indie music, I felt purposeful again. Like I mattered. The wedding binder. Yes, I made a physical one, was growing. I divided it by sections. Florals, menu tastings, dress shops, though I knew Harper wouldn't want my opinion, and even entertainment options. One DJ promised to weave in classic soul ballads for the older guests and throw in a disco hour at night. Another vendor specialized in outdoor lighting installations. Twinkle lights across the vineyard, glowing candles lining the garden paths. It was beautiful, what I was building. And completely, utterly hidden. I knew Harper would explode if she found out, but a small part of me, the reckless, hurt part, hoped she would. Maybe then Matthew would see how far I'd gone to support them, even after being shoved to the sidelines. I hadn't told Mom, not that she would have cared. She'd made a vague comment the other day while chopping onions. It's better to let young couples handle their own affairs. You don't want to come off. Overbearing. Overbearing. That word lodged itself in my chest like a splinter. Funny how they twist your love into something ugly the moment it no longer serves them. I closed my laptop and glanced around the cafe, taking a breath. In a small town like Napa, even secrets start to feel loud. But no one here knew what I was doing. To them, I was just another woman sipping coffee, maybe writing a novel or shopping for a new house. If only, I'd never felt more alone, and yet more focused, than I did right now. And I wasn't doing this to prove anything. I was doing it because Matthew deserved a day filled with joy, not the tension that had already begun to creep around the edges. I could feel it, like a storm moving just offshore. No thunder yet, but the clouds were gathering. As I left the cafe that afternoon, the sun filtered through the trees and made the sidewalk shimmer. I clutched the wedding binder to my chest and whispered something to myself I hadn't said in years. I deserved to be here too. The barn had been dressed to impress. Rustic chandeliers hung from thick wooden beams, casting a warm glow over white-clothed tables and bouquets of wildflowers in mason jars. Strings of fairy lights crisscrossed above the guests, and a jazz quartet played soft melodies from the far corner. I had to admit, Harper had taste. Or maybe she had just mimicked the Pinterest boards I'd once curated during long shifts at the cafe when wedding planning was just a dream. I adjusted my dress, dusty rose chiffon, simple and elegant, and smoothed a wrinkle near the waist before stepping inside. My heels clicked against the polished wood floor as I scanned the room. There they were. Matthew stood by the head table, beaming, looking effortlessly handsome in a crisp navy suit. Harper clung to his arm, her dress glittering in a way that somehow felt loud in this quaint setting. She leaned into him like she was afraid someone might steal him the moment she let go. When he saw me, his face lit up. "Claire!" Matthew weaved through the crowd to hug me. "God, I'm so glad you're here." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, hugging him back. His scent, cedar and cologne, was familiar and comforting. "I saw the binder," he whispered in my ear. "The vendors, the venue, it's amazing. You've seriously saved us." My heart swelled. "I just wanted to help. You've always been my rock, you know that," he said, smiling. Then Harper appeared at his side like a storm cloud. "There you are," she purred, pressing a possessive hand to his chest. Her eyes flitted to me, and though her lips smiled, her gaze held the chill of a dagger's edge. "Oh," she said sweetly, "Claire's always available." The words rang out like a bell across the table. I felt my spine straighten. The guests nearby, cousins, family, friends, turned slightly, uncertain whether to laugh or pretend they hadn't heard. "Available?" I asked, eyebrows lifted, my voice light but even. "MMHMM." She gave a tiny, casual shrug. "Always the dependable one, always there." Matthew glanced between us, clearly sensing the undercurrent but unsure where to step. I chuckled softly, keeping my tone steady. "Well, family matters." Harper tilted her head. "Of course, just don't exhaust yourself. We don't want you to feel overcommitted." The subtle barb nestled itself right under my skin, sharp and quiet. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Thanks for the concern, but I manage." Dinner passed in a haze of conversation and clinking glasses. My appetite was gone, but I forced small bites of rosemary chicken and sipped champagne to keep up appearances. Everyone toasted the couple. My uncle delivered a boisterous speech about Harper's elegance and Matthew's generosity. My cousin Jude got a laugh with a few mild roasts about growing up with Matthew. And then it was my turn. Matthew called me up, his voice full of warmth. "Claire's the reason we're all eating good food and sitting in such a beautiful place tonight. She took care of a lot behind the scenes. She's been my rock through all of this." I stood, heart pounding. The applause felt genuine. Even Harper clapped, though her hands barely touched. "I'm just glad I could help," I said into the mic, offering a small smile. "Matthew, you've always had the best heart, and seeing you happy, really happy, means everything to me. I just want what's best for you both." Soft murmurs of approval. A few glasses raised in cheers. I sat back down. Then Harper leaned close to her bridesmaid, a girl named Camilla, and stage whispered just loud enough for the nearby table to hear, "She does mean well. She just doesn't always know when to let go." I froze. So did Camilla, who gave a tiny, awkward chuckle. The jab landed deep, not because it was cruel, but because it was calculated. Slippery, coated in sugar. The kind of insult that people excuse because it's just a comment. I stared at the floral centerpiece in front of me, feeling my face flush. Let go. What did she mean of Matthew? Of control? Of helping? But I said nothing. Not yet. Instead, I smoothed the hem of my dress again and quietly reached for my champagne. Let them think what they want. Because while Harper was rehearsing for the perfect wedding, I had already started planning for something else entirely. The candlelight outside the vineyard barn flickered like it could sense something coming. Most of the guests had migrated toward the wine-tasting terrace, buzzed and content, wrapped in cozy shawls and bourbon-laced laughter. The mood was warm, easy, on the surface. But I felt it the second I stepped outside. Like Harper had been waiting. She was leaning casually against a vine-covered column, phone in one hand, a half-empty glass of red in the other. Her lips were pursed in a way that tried to look relaxed but didn't quite make it. The moment she spotted me, she straightened. "Claire," she called softly. I almost kept walking. But something in her voice, not warm, not exactly hostile, just certain, made me stop. "I thought we should have a quick word," she said, sauntering toward me like this was all premeditated. "Just us." I crossed my arms. "Sure, what's on your mind?" She took a long sip of wine before answering, eyes scanning me as if evaluating a weakness. "Look, I know you've been trying really hard. The venue, the florist, the spreadsheets." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You've been involved." I said nothing. She tilted her head. "But this day is about Matthew and me, and I think it's time you stepped back." There it was. The wall finally built in front of me, brick by brick, courtesy of Harper. "I was helping," I said evenly. "Because no one else seemed to be doing anything, including you." Her smile sharpened. "Oh, Claire, you really think this wedding needs your touch to be beautiful?" She laughed once, quiet and cruel. "You've been hovering, inserting yourself like some leftover from Matthew's past life." My chest tightened. "Leftover," I repeated. She stepped closer, dropping her voice like it was a secret. "This day is for real family, and if you cared about Matthew's happiness, you'd stop trying to make everything about you." Something in me snapped. "You mean like when you announced, in front of everyone, that my offer to help was intrusive, or when you twisted my toast into some commentary on my inability to let go? Because that didn't feel like love, Harper. That felt like territory marking." She blinked. "I didn't come out here to argue." "No," I said. "You came out here to put me in my place." She straightened, wine glass now perfectly still in her hand. "If that's what it takes to protect Matthew's future from drama, then yes." The word drama hung between us like smoke. I took a step forward. "Let me make one thing very clear. I'm not here for attention. I've been silent, respectful, careful, but don't confuse my silence for weakness. I didn't plan this wedding to steal your spotlight. I did it because no one else was doing the work." She scoffed. "You think you're the only one who's ever worked hard for Matthew. I know what he needs. He doesn't need his sister pretending she's still the most important woman in his life." That stung. Not because it was true, but because she believed it was. I steadied my breath. "You don't get to erase people just because you're marrying into the family. I've earned my place. You don't get to decide I don't belong." Harper took one step back, eyes narrowing. "This isn't about belonging," she said. "It's about understanding your limits. This is my wedding, my future." And you? You're just a page in the prologue." The silence that followed could have cracked glass. She tossed the rest of her wine into the grass and started walking past me. But then she paused just over her shoulder. "Stay out of my way, Claire." And with that, she vanished into the glow of the terrace lights. I stood there, frozen beneath the canopy of stars and resentment, my breath uneven, my heart full of something sharp and electric. I didn't move for a long time. Stay out of her way, that's what she wanted. But the truth, she was already in mine. The morning light was soft and forgiving, like it didn't know what had happened the night before, or maybe it just didn't care. I stood in the kitchen of my childhood home, barefoot, staring at the tea kettle that had just begun to hiss. The scent of brewed coffee curled through the air like a lullaby, but it did nothing to calm the storm swirling inside me. I hadn't slept. Harper's words, "This is for real family," had carved their place into my mind like names etched into wet cement. I needed to talk to someone who would see me, believe me, so I turned to the only person I thought might still be on my side. Mom. She sat at the kitchen table in her usual spot, a linen robe wrapped tight around her, the newspaper folded neatly beside her favorite floral mug. She looked up as I walked in, her expression unreadable. "Morning," I offered cautiously. "Morning," she echoed, taking a sip of coffee. "You're up early." I hesitated. "Couldn't sleep." Mom didn't ask why. Just reached for the sugar bowl. "I need to talk to you about something," I said. She glanced up again, the tiniest flicker of wariness in her eyes. "Okay." I took a breath. "It's about Harper. Last night she pulled me aside after the rehearsal dinner and she said some things, really cruel things." Mom's brows lifted. "Like what?" "She told me I wasn't real family, that I needed to stay out of her way, that I'm a leftover from Matthew's past." My voice caught a little on that last part. Mom's expression didn't change, not even a blink. I continued. "I've been trying to help, and she's made it so clear that I'm not wanted. I thought you should know." There was a long silence. She set down her mug. "Claire, weddings bring out the worst in people sometimes. It's a stressful time. That doesn't make it okay." "I'm not saying it is," she said gently, "but maybe you misinterpreted." I stared at her. "I didn't," she was crystal clear. Mom sighed, folding her hands on the table. "You've always had a strong personality, sweetheart, and I know your heart is in the right place, but sometimes you can come on a little strong." There it was, not a defense, not a comfort, a correction. "I wasn't being strong," I said. "I was being helpful. I've done everything I can to support Matthew." "I know." Her voice was soft but flat. "But this isn't your wedding, it's theirs." I felt something inside me tilt. "I'm his sister. That doesn't just go away because he's marrying someone." "I never said it did. But you're defending her. You're defending someone who told me to my face that I didn't belong." She stood and walked to the sink, rinsing her cup as if we were talking about the weather. "Claire, let Matthew be happy. That's what matters right now." I stared at her back. "Even if it means erasing me." She didn't turn around. "Don't make a scene." The words fell like ice cubes into boiling water. "I wasn't planning to," I whispered, the hurt catching me off guard. "But I thought you might care that your daughter is being pushed out of her own brother's life." She finally turned then, eyes tired. "You always take things so personally." I blinked. "Because they are personal." She wiped her hands on a towel, then reached for the paper again. "Try not to stir anything up before the wedding, okay? It's just nerves. Harper will calm down." But I wouldn't. I stood there for a moment longer, waiting for her to realize what she'd just said. She never did. So I left the kitchen, the kettle still hissing softly behind me as if it too had something to say but had been trained, like the rest of us, to keep quiet. And as I closed the door to my old bedroom, the truth landed hard in my chest. I was on my own. My apartment smelled like vanilla candles and quiet revenge. It was the first time in days I'd felt calm. Not happy. Not at peace. Just. Still. The binder sat on the table in front of me, the tabs all color-coded. The pages worn from love, time, and disappointment. It should have felt like a monument to my efforts. But now it just looked like proof of how little anyone valued me. I opened my laptop and clicked into the wedding folder, heart thudding. One tab after another blinked open. The caterer's invoice, the floral contract, the DJ's deposit receipt. Every one of them had my name on it. Every one of them had been paid with my money, and every one of them could be reversed. It wasn't spite. It wasn't drama, it was clarity, the kind born of cruelty, I clicked open the florist's contact info first. Sandra, the owner, picked up after 2 rings. "Hi, Sandra, it's Claire Monroe," I said, steady and polite. "I'm calling to cancel the floral arrangement order under my name." There was a pause. "Oh, everything okay?" "We've had some changes in the wedding plans," I said, keeping it vague. "I'll need a full refund on the deposit. It was paid on my card." "I can issue that right away," she said. "Do you want to reschedule or—" "No," I said, sharper than intended. "Just cancel it." One down. Next was the caterer, David, a lovely man who had walked me through tasting menus and gluten-free options with saintly patience. He sounded confused when I told him the date was no longer valid. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said. "Should I reach out to the bride instead?" "No," I said quickly. "She's not involved in this arrangement. Everything was booked through me." That gave him pause. Then came the string quartet, the lighting crew, the signature cocktail specialist who promised edible flowers and custom drink stirrers with Matthew and Harper's initials. One by one, the emails were sent. One by one, the pieces of the wedding fell. Each click of cancel felt like closing a door I'd left open too long. I sat back in my chair, surprised by the tears pooling in my eyes. Not because I regretted it, but because I didn't. I had poured myself into this day for Matthew, for our family, for the memory of who we were before Harper turned warmth into territory, and for what? To be mocked, silenced, sidelined. I glanced down at the cancellation emails now stacked in my inbox. Each one was a receipt of my boundaries returning. I wasn't unkind, I wasn't vindictive, but I wasn't disposable either. And if no one was going to protect me from being erased, I'd do it myself. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. I let it ring. Then came a text from the Bramblewood Inn, confirming the venue's reservation had been officially withdrawn. The refund would post within 3 business days. I stared at that text for a long time. That vineyard had felt like magic when I booked it. I imagined Harper walking down the aisle with vines behind her, Matthew crying happy tears, and our family laughing under chandeliers and wine-sweet air. That dream was gone. But so was the illusion that I had to keep giving just to be worthy of being kept around. I shut the binder slowly, slid it into a drawer, and turned off my laptop. The silence afterward was deafening and delicious. It was the sound of no longer being someone's convenient afterthought. It was the sound of letting go. Not of Matthew, but of the need to prove I belonged. It started with a phone call Harper couldn't ignore. She was standing in the middle of a bridal boutique, trying on what was supposed to be the dress, mermaid-cut silk with a plunging back and a price tag that could make a mortgage blush when her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She declined it. It rang again. Then again. Finally, she answered with that sharp, clipped tone she used on waiters who got her order wrong. "This is Harper." "Hi, this is Sandra from Petal and Thorn Florals. We received a cancellation notice for your wedding arrangements this morning. I just wanted to confirm." "Excuse me." Harper's voice cut through the quiet of the boutique. The dress consultant flinched. "There must be a mistake," Harper continued. "We never canceled anything. I have a note here that the order was booked and paid under a Claire Monroe." Harper blinked, then slowly turned toward the mirror. Her reflection stared back in perfect confusion, eyebrows arched, mouth slightly parted. "I'll call you back," she said, then hung up. The phone buzzed again. This time it was David, the caterer. "Just double-checking the menu revisions and refund processing," he said cheerfully. "We hated to lose the event, but—" "We didn't lose anything," Harper snapped. "We're still getting married next weekend." There was a long pause. "Then I suggest you speak to Claire," David said, "because she was the client." "And she canceled." Harper's breath caught in her throat. A third call came in, then a fourth. One from the lighting designer, one from the quartet. Each one a domino falling. Each one with the same message: Claire canceled. Claire paid. Claire called the shots. The panic came slow at first, then fast, like a hairline crack in a dam suddenly bursting. Harper stormed out of the boutique, dress forgotten, veil dragging behind her. Her heels clacked like war drums on the marble floor. She called Matthew. He didn't answer. She called again, left a voicemail, then a text. "Something's wrong. Claire messed with the wedding. Call me now." But Matthew was in meetings all day, back-to-back calls for a new marketing project he couldn't afford to miss. He wouldn't see the messages until much later. So Harper drove, recklessly, one hand on the wheel, the other frantically calling vendors, digging through email confirmations, trying to claw back control of something she never really held. The truth unraveled faster than she could keep up. Claire had been behind it all. The venue, the florals, the food, the music. The vendors had talked to her, not Harper. The contracts had been signed by her. The deposits were under her name. All the things Harper took for granted had been Claire's gift. And now, gone. By the time she pulled into her driveway, Harper was pale and shaking, her phone battery at 3%, her voice hoarse from arguing with strangers who politely told her that refunds were processing, dates were released, and unfortunately, nothing could be undone without the original client's permission. She slammed the car door and staggered into the house, only to find June, my mother, already sitting on the couch, wine glass in hand, waiting. "You heard?" Harper asked. June nodded once, not looking up from the rim of her glass. Claire canceled everything. "I don't understand," Harper said, breathless. "She just pulled out." June finally looked at her. "You made it very clear you didn't want her involved." "I didn't mean this. She was supposed to help, not sabotage." June tilted her head. "You dismissed her, you humiliated her, and you expected her to keep doing the work anyway." Harper blinked. "She said she didn't want to be involved," Harper mumbled. "No," June said softly. "You said that in front of everyone." Harper sank into the nearest chair. "And now," June asked, voice almost curious, "now that she's pulled the plug, what exactly are you left with?" Harper's hands trembled. Control. That was what she had always clung to, demanded, manipulated, charmed her way into. But now, it was slipping through her fingers like water, and she had no one to blame but herself. The knock came at 10:14 a.m., 3 hard raps, followed by silence. I didn't have to look through the peephole, I already knew. I stood in my kitchen, clutching a chipped coffee mug like it could shield me. The world outside had been spinning quietly, soft music from the neighbor's window, a kid's scooter scraping along the sidewalk, birds bickering in the hedges. And now my past had arrived on my doorstep. I opened the door. June was standing there, her polished blouse tucked into cream trousers, her hair too neat for this kind of visit. Harper stood just behind her, makeup perfect, face unreadable like she had practiced a dozen expressions and settled on none. "Claire," Mom said, like it was just another Sunday. I stepped aside wordlessly. They walked in. The living room felt smaller instantly, the air tightening around the edges. I didn't offer them coffee. I didn't pretend we were fine. Harper was the first to speak. "I know there's been tension," she began, "but we need to talk about the wedding." "No," I said, "you need to talk, I'll listen." She blinked, caught off guard. June sat down slowly. "Claire, sweetheart, we understand you're hurt, we do, but the wedding is tomorrow. Vendors are backing out, guests are flying in, this isn't just about you anymore." I turned to her. "When was it ever?" She flinched, just slightly. Harper jumped in. "Look, I was stressed. I said things I shouldn't have. But that doesn't mean you should ruin Matthew's day." "I'm not ruining anything," I said. "I just stopped saving it." Harper's mask cracked. "Look, you proved your point, okay," she snapped. "You made your stand, you're not invisible, congratulations, but now we need to fix this. We can't get another venue in time, we can't rebook everything." She glanced at June for backup. "Claire, just call the vendors," June said, softer. "Have them reinstate the contracts. We'll reimburse you for everything. We'll even say you planned the whole thing if that's what you want." My jaw clenched. "What I want," I said, "is respect, inclusion, to not be treated like a wedding intern who doesn't know when to disappear." Harper crossed her arms. "We didn't mean for it to go this far." I stared at her. "You stood on a terrace and told me I wasn't real family." Silence. Then June spoke, her voice tremulous. "Matthew doesn't know any of this yet. We didn't want to upset him." "Of course you didn't," I said. "You wanted to control the damage before he found out the truth." Harper's eyes narrowed. "This isn't helping anyone, Claire. Neither is pretending I didn't exist in this process," I shot back. "You told everyone this was your wedding, that you were doing everything yourselves, so now do it." June stood, her voice suddenly sharp. "Claire, please, if you love your brother, you'll fix this." I stepped back, my chest tight. I do love him. That's why I planned this in the first place. That's why I backed off when asked. That's why I'm done now. Harper's voice wobbled finally, the facade crumbling. You're ruining everything. No, I said, steady now. I'm just not carrying it anymore. They stared at me, waiting, hoping I'd fold, that the old Claire, the accommodating, apologetic, always their sister, would step in and rescue their mess. I didn't. Instead, I walked to the door and opened it. I think we're done here. June's face crumpled, her voice barely above a whisper. You'll regret this. I already regretted staying silent this long. Harper didn't say a word, just brushed past me on her way out, her shoulder grazing mine like a cold wind. And then they were gone. I stood in the open doorway, the morning sun warming my face, my heart pounding with something terrifying and electric. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't begged. I just held the line. And for the first time in this entire mess, I felt like I wasn't the one unraveling. They were. The sun rose like it didn't know better. It was wedding day. Or it was supposed to be. By 10 a.m., the Bramblewood Inn's sprawling reception hall, usually buzzing with staff, floral scents, and the sweet panic of last-minute details, stood completely still. Tables were bare. No music drifted through the speakers. The string quartet's corner sat empty, the stage stripped of its instruments, the dance floor silent. No linens, no candles, no food, just emptiness and confusion hanging thick in the air. One by one, the guests arrived. First came Aunt Melanie in her blush silk jacket and pearls, trailing behind Uncle Ken, who squinted around the empty room with the squint of a man who thought he'd shown up on the wrong day. Then came Matthew's college roommate, Devin, and his wife, who stood near the doorway whispering as their toddler asked loudly, "Where's the party?" And then more came, dozens, all dressed in their best, all stepping into a venue that looked like it had been abandoned mid-dream. Murmurs started bubbling. Was there a time change? Are we early? No, the invitation says noon. Harper arrived next, half an hour late, makeup perfect, hair tight in an updo that didn't move. But even her stilettos clicked with a kind of uncertainty as she stepped into the void. She scanned the space like it might suddenly transform, like the decorations might leap out from behind the curtains, yell surprise, and restore her control. Nothing happened. The only thing that greeted her was the hollow echo of footsteps on tile and the chill of judgment in the air. June followed close behind, clutching her clutch like a shield. A few guests tried to ask what was going on. Harper waved them off with the grace of a drowning pageant queen. "It's being handled," she said stiffly. Only it wasn't, because there was no one left to handle it. The vendors hadn't returned. The venue manager, Elise, had already told me over the phone, "Without Claire's approval, we have no signed contracts. They can rent the space if they want, but we're not decorating an unpaid party." I hadn't shown up yet, but I wasn't hiding either. I waited, just out of sight, leaning against my car near the edge of the venue's gravel lot, watching the flurry of guests shuffle in and out, checking their watches, checking their phones, checking each other for answers. And still no sign of Matthew. Not yet. Not until nearly an hour after the official start time, when his car pulled into the lot with screeching tires, dust swirling behind it. He stepped out in his tailored navy suit, tie half-fastened, confusion etched deep into his face. He looked around. And then he saw it, the empty tables, the muttering guests. The way people were now leaving in little clusters, whispering as they walked. He walked up to the main entrance, eyes scanning everything, heart clearly racing. "Where is everyone?" he asked the nearest usher. The young man shrugged. "No idea, man, we just got here and this is how it was." Matthew turned toward the reception hall. Harper was inside, pacing like a caged animal, phone glued to her ear. She looked up, saw him, and froze. He didn't go to her, not yet. He stepped back out onto the gravel, rubbing the back of his neck, his whole body tense. Then he saw me. I hadn't moved, I didn't smile, I didn't wave, I just waited, his jaw clenched. He walked toward me, slow and unsure, like he wasn't certain what he was about to hear, and when he finally reached me, his voice was hoarse. "Claire, what the hell happened?" He stood there, jaw tight, breath uneven. "Claire," Matthew said again, lower now. "Talk to me. What's going on?" I stepped forward, not just toward him, but toward the chaos I hadn't caused, only revealed. "The venue's bare, no food, no flowers, no music," he said, voice rising with each observation. Everyone's confused and Harper's acting like it's just a glitch. But this isn't a glitch, this is sabotage. I looked at him fully, the way you look at someone before you tell them something that will crack their world a little, but finally let light in. I canceled everything, I said quietly. He blinked. What? I planned it, all of it, I said, gesturing to the silent space around us. The vendors, the venue, the catering, you remember thanking me at the rehearsal dinner, all those people you thought Harper had coordinated. They were mine. I booked them, paid the deposits, managed the details. His face shifted, but he stayed silent. I did it because I love you, I added, my voice breaking. Because no one else seemed to care if your wedding actually happened, I thought. Maybe if I worked quietly enough, I'd earn a seat at the table. He shook his head, eyes narrowing. But why cancel it? I took a breath, heart pounding as the words rose from the place inside me where they'd been buried too long. Because Harper made it very clear this wasn't our day, this was hers, and I was in the way. Behind him, Harper stormed toward us. Oh, come on, she snapped, voice high and tight. She's twisting everything. Matthew turned slowly. Let her speak, he said, his tone unreadable. Harper froze. I continued. She told me to stay out of it. She humiliated me in front of guests. She told me I wasn't real family and warned me not to ruin her day. She didn't mean it, June cut in, appearing suddenly from the side, hands clasped. It was the stress. You know how these things go, people say things they don't mean. I turned to her. You said that too, I said. You told me not to make a scene, that I was taking things personally. You brushed it off like I was just being dramatic. More guests were gathering now, edging closer, listening. The silence in the venue wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Every voice that had been silenced now filled that quiet. I kept going, I said to Matthew. I kept helping, even when I wasn't wanted, even when she made jokes at my expense, even when you didn't notice I was being slowly pushed out of the biggest moment of your life. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I didn't let the pause linger. I canceled everything because I couldn't keep pretending I was welcome. And maybe you didn't know what was happening, but once I realized I was doing it all just to be erased, something inside me said enough. Harper stepped forward again, desperate now. Matthew, she's lying. She misunderstood. She's been trying to sabotage us from the beginning. Matthew turned to her. No, he said. She hasn't. His voice was flat, quiet. The kind of quiet that signals something's over. The room stilled. He looked between the two of us, his bride and his sister. Then his gaze returned to me. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He asked. Because I thought you'd take her side, I said honestly. Because you usually do. He looked down, the weight of that landing hard. Behind him, guests began whispering. Not cruelly, but with the sound of people processing truths they hadn't been ready to see. And Harper just stood there, blinking too fast, her perfect eye makeup beginning to crack. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Because for once no one was rushing in to rescue her. The silence that followed my words wasn't empty. It was full of breath being held, full of eyes darting from me to Harper, full of 1,000 unspoken things finally having nowhere to hide. I could feel the weight of it pressing on my chest, but I didn't flinch. Harper did. She looked at Matthew like she could still charm her way out of this, like the gleam in her eye and the softness in her voice might be enough to undo what had just been said. Matt, she said, stepping forward. She's twisting things. You know how Claire is. She takes everything so personally. She misreads the room, gets in over her head, and then spins it like she's the victim. She gave a breathy laugh like it was all just a little misunderstanding between sisters-in-law. But no one laughed with her. Matthew didn't move. Claire didn't twist anything, he said quietly. Harper's smile faltered. You're not seriously buying this. I'm not buying anything, he said. I'm witnessing it. His voice was flat, cold, and that more than anything made Harper falter. I watched her try to help. I saw how much time she poured into making this day happen, he continued. I saw her step back when you snapped at her, and I didn't say anything. I let it slide because I wanted to believe it was just tension. He paused, then added with a low ache in his voice, but I think I knew. Harper's eyes welled up. So what? You're siding with her now? No, he said. I'm siding with the truth. She looked around the room like someone waking up from a bad dream, only to realize it wasn't a dream at all. Guests were watching, some shaking their heads, others folding their arms. She tried one last time. She's jealous. She always has been. You and I were building something new, and she didn't know how to handle that. I stayed silent. I didn't need to say anything anymore. She was doing it for me. Matthew took a deep breath, then turned to face her fully. If you want this wedding to happen, he said slowly, you're going to apologize to my sister right now in front of everyone. The room went still, Harper's face drained of color. What? You heard me. She looked to June, to the guests, to anyone, but no one came to her rescue. Matthew, you can't be serious. He nodded. Completely. If I don't, he didn't blink, then this wedding doesn't happen. A soft gasp rippled through the crowd. Harper's jaw clenched. She looked at me like I was the cause of it all, but I wasn't. I was just the consequence. Her hands trembled as she turned toward me, her chin lifted in defiance. I'm sorry, she said. The words were brittle and sharp. I didn't mean to exclude you. I stared at her. That wasn't the truth, and we both knew it. But I nodded once, because it wasn't about her sincerity. It was about the line Matthew had finally drawn. She stood there, waiting maybe for absolution. But I wasn't going to offer that either. She turned back to Matthew. His jaw was set, his eyes unreadable. And for the first time, Harper looked small next to him, deflated. The guests turned away one by one, some murmuring, some heading outside, giving the three of us space. Matthew looked at me again. I should have protected you, he said. You shouldn't have had to, I replied. But thank you. We stood there a long moment, brother and sister, finally on even ground again. And somewhere behind the pain, I felt something shift, not victory, not revenge, just truth, and in a family that had learned to whisper over discomfort that was more radical than anything else. The apology had been spoken, but not felt. Still, the moment passed like a storm that didn't leave, just shifted direction. Matthew turned to me quietly, almost unsure. Can it be fixed? I looked down at my phone. The vendors' numbers were still saved. Refunds hadn't fully processed. My name still carried the authority Harper had tried to erase. Yes, I said, but it won't be perfect. It doesn't need to be, he replied. Just real. That at least I could offer. I called Sandra from the florist first. Last minute, she said, surprised but gentle. Well, we kept the centerpieces in the van just in case. David, the caterer, said the same. Truck's loaded. We can be there in 45 if the ovens are hot. One by one, the old plans stirred awake. The venue lit up slowly, table linens unfolded, candles lit, chairs arranged. It was like watching a party exhale. But the air was different now. Guests returned tentatively, like they weren't sure whether to cheer or whisper. Music played, soft and unsure at first, as if even the speakers were gauging the mood. Harper appeared hours later in a new dress, sleek and subtle, no longer trying to impress, only endure. Her eyes were ringed with exhaustion that even makeup couldn't hide. June kept her distance. No one asked questions. The ceremony began just after sunset. The vines glowed golden under the string lights, the officiant's voice calm and practiced. Matthew stood at the altar, expression quiet, hands folded, eyes scanning the crowd for someone he trusted. When he found me, he gave the smallest nod, not for show, just for me. Harper walked down the aisle like she wasn't sure what waited at the end, but she walked anyway. And when they exchanged vows, they said the words right. They smiled at the right beats. They kissed. People clapped. But it wasn't the fairy tale she had planned. It was something messier, something earned, maybe, or salvaged. The reception was beautiful on the surface. The food was rich, the flowers vivid, the music better than expected for such a chaotic save. But underneath it all was something quieter, a reckoning. People whispered more than they danced, smiled more than they laughed. No one toasted too loudly. No one called the couple a perfect match. It wasn't that they disapproved. It was that they had seen too much. Me. I stood to the side, sipping champagne, accepting nods and quiet thank yous from guests who now knew what I had carried alone. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Harper passed me once near the dessert table. Her eyes met mine just briefly. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her silence was the first honest thing she'd offered all day. 6 months later, the leaves had turned to gold and rust, and the world smelled like cinnamon and old memories. It was Thanksgiving. And for the first time in years, I wasn't dreading it. Matthew had offered to host. A quiet gathering, just family, close and small. The kind where everyone brings a dish and pretends not to notice who didn't season their green beans. I stood on the porch holding a pecan pie and a bottle of wine, heart strangely calm. When the door opened, Matthew greeted me with a wide, unforced smile. "You made it," he said, as if there had ever been a doubt. He took the pie from my hands like it was the most important thing in the world. Inside, the table was already set, candles lit, silverware gleaming, laughter echoing from the kitchen. Harper was there, too, sitting at the far end of the dining table, quietly folding napkins into little fans. She looked up when I walked in. Her smile was small, careful, but it was real. She didn't rush over to greet me, didn't make a show. She simply nodded, like someone who had learned not to overstep where she once trampled. We hadn't spoken since the wedding. Not really. No long talks. No forced reconciliation, but something had shifted. She no longer ignored me, no longer spoke over me. And more than once I'd heard from Matthew that she'd corrected people who tried to diminish my role that day. Growth doesn't always come with a bow. Sometimes it comes with silence. We sat around the table, the food passed, the wine poured. Stories were told, some old, some new. When I shared one about me and Matthew as kids, Harper didn't roll her eyes. She laughed, genuinely. It startled me. And when someone made a snide comment about not needing 3 desserts, Matthew was the first to respond. "Claire brought that pecan pie, and believe me, we need it." No wink, no joking nudge, just truth, just loyalty. And in that moment I realized something. I hadn't lost a family. I just redefined mine. Boundaries had been drawn, respect had been earned. And while the damage from that wedding weekend hadn't magically vanished, it had created space for something new, something more honest. After dinner, Harper helped clear the plates without being asked. At one point, she leaned in, not meeting my eyes, and said softly, "The flowers at the wedding, they were beautiful." I nodded. "They were." She didn't say more. She didn't need to. Not everything has to be spoken to be understood.